My name is Larry Savage. I'm from Anderson, Indiana. I'm married to my beautiful wife, Celeste, of 26 years. We have 3 boys, Seth, Trevor, and Evan. My oldest boy is almost 30 years old. I can't believe it. The reason why I'm bald is because my second son, he works at the Sheriff's Department down here in Madison County. And then I've got a great son, Evan. He's 19. He works with kids with disabilities. He kind of has taken on after his dad. I do that in my spare time. I work with kids with autism, traumatic brain injuries, and I also run property management as my main job. I love those kids. It's a passion of mine. They come from broken homes, bad homes, and we take them and we try to just have fun with them and do things that they're not able to do in their own home life with their own families. I'm a Christian man. I have a lot of faith. Sometimes you might question that, but I'm just who I am. I grew up in Anderson as a very poor kid. I had 2 other brothers, Adam and Phil. I can't tell you how many times we fought over socks and shoes and underwear because that's all. We were just poor kids. I grew up in a single parent home. My mother worked at Hardee's over here on 53rd Street. I think not having a father in the home has driven me to be a fantastic father. I hope that I was a fantastic father. I think my kids would tell you I was. But America's broke, and I'm here to try to help fix it. It's time for people to start standing up and serving our country. And I think with everything that's going on in the world today, we have to put a regular person that feels your pain. And that's why I'm here today. I hope if you have any questions, I'd love to answer them, but that's me. I'm here to fight for you, and I'm here to work hard for you. And I'm telling you, when I do something, I go 100% at it. So I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
My name is Patrick Malayter. I'm still a CPA, but I'm a retired CPA. What got me into the race? Well, probably like 90% of people in the country, I've been concerned about what's been going on. But specifically, a few of the drivers were, first, I've been listening to this podcast, and one of the podcast hosts has been telling folks that one of the biggest problems with the Republican Party is that a lot of folks aren't willing to go ahead and step up and get involved. Well, that obviously didn't happen in the 5th District race, right? I'd say a second thing, when Victoria left the race, I did spend some time kind of studying some of the different positions of the other candidates, and honestly, I felt a lot of the positions were just general Republican talking points, where I really had some crisp ideas of how and what needed to get fixed and develop specific plans to do that. And probably the third driver was our son and I, we took a bicycle trip to Italy in September. And normally when I got back into the United States from a trip abroad, I would be kissing the ground of the tarmac at the airport. And this time I didn't. And part of it was the places that we saw, the cities were clean, they were safe, people took care of themselves and so forth. It was kind of like the way the United States used to be, as I recall. And I wanted to try to bring that back. So those were probably 3 of the genesis issues that got me into the race. I spent the entire month of October thinking about, okay, what would be the pivot points that could make change if I were successful as a candidate? And what came to the top was congressional term limits, because we all are smart enough to know that nothing's going to change if nothing changes. So that's what got me into the race. A little bit about myself. I'm originally from downtown Gary, Indiana. Very blue collar. I grew up in a lower middle class family. Back then, Gary was the murder capital of the world. So I got in a fist fight of some type almost every day between ages 11 and 15, simply because that's what you had to live with. I ended up going to a Catholic high school, Andrean in Maryville, Indiana. Marty went there as well. My interests pretty much at the time were rock and roll music, lifting weights, and football. I was a pretty good football player, got all state recognition, but didn't get a lot of D1 interest. I was recruited lightly by Northwestern. I had an appointment to play at the Air Force Academy, but this pesky issue with not being able to see. So professionally, I ended up going to Indiana University, became a CPA, made partner with one of the largest accounting firms in the world, KPMG. Ended up running the national tax practice for a firm called Forbes, now 7th largest, so I have a great understanding of tax issues. So my biggest concerns right now is how the economy is affecting people of all ages, including my youngest daughter here, Jacqueline, because they are inheriting a debt load that is just unsustainable. Thank you.
So my name is Engling. Like these gentlemen, I'm running here in the 5th Congressional District. And I'm a Christian first and foremost. I'm also a husband. And folks that have heard me say this before, you know this is who I am. My wife Kelsey, she's not here tonight, but she's taking care of the third thing, which is a father. And I've got 4 little people that are in the house, and I very much appreciate them. And when you look into the future, that's a lot of why I'm doing this. We've got a daughter, a son, and then 2 daughters in a row. So they keep us on our toes, but very much love them. And then the last piece of it is that I'm a conservative. And I think that's the right order for it. I think you have to be a conservative, though, to be able to do this job well in the way that we see it and how to pull our country back. Now, I'm not a career politician. I know we're not talking about some of the other folks in the race, but I'm not. And some of the other folks are, not sitting around this table. And so, but I do have a lot of experience in public service, both here in Indiana and out in Washington, D.C. Over 14 years of my life that's been spent saying, how do I serve people on the conservative side? Serve people in the public to make sure that I'm giving what I know how to do best. So what drives me is faith, family, and hard work. I'm a Christian, I mentioned that. We go to Harbor Shores Church in Cicero. I grew up in a Christian household. I was one of 8 kids in that Christian household. I was the second oldest, so I had a lot of responsibilities there. But really, growing up in a Christian household is only so good as if you take that for yourself and say, okay, this is my faith. And my wife and I have really been challenged to do that and say, this is my personal relationship, and I want to take that and lean into that with my children. Another part of that, too, is that when you look out and you see what was our country founded on, what did our founding fathers say? It was built on Judeo-Christian values. And we're not doing that anymore. We don't care about that anymore, it seems like, as a country. We've pivoted so far into just make up your own truth about anything. And that is frustrating to me, and a lot of the reason why I'm in this to say, how do we get back to that? When you look at the family side, so I mentioned that I've got 4 kids. That's a big piece of it. When you look out and say, is our country going to be, 1, around for the next generation, but 2, is it going to be a better place for the next generation? And that's particularly important to me. And one of the things that's really becomes top of mind as you're doing this is that it's not really anymore that you can look out to the future and say, hey, we're going to solve some of these big problems that we can see on the horizon. It's like, no, those problems are challenges now. Those were yesterday's challenges that we're behind on already. And so we need to make sure we get to work right away on those issues. And then the last part is hard work. So I've worked my entire life. I started early. I had to get paid under the table for my first couple of jobs. But when you're one of 8 kids and you're the second to the top, you do what you got to do to get money when you need it. Detasseled corn, baled hay, and when you detassel corn for 2 seasons, that ends up being on you. They trick you for 1 season, but the second season, then it's your own fault. So they got me. But I worked construction as well. I waited tables. I paid my way through school. I went to Ivy Tech first because I was paying my own way and I wanted to get my gen eds out of the way. And then I went to IUPUI and I worked construction and waited tables during that period as well. And then later, I'll catch up to this in a minute, but I did go back and get my master's from the Naval War College. So I was not in the Navy, but I was able to go to the Naval War College based on my time in the House and being sponsored in by a current member of Congress to do that. And it was very beneficial to me with a national security and strategic planning emphasis. So, worked very hard. I was volunteering with or interning for conservative campaigns here in Indiana after I graduated from school, actually during school as well, and then worked for a small business in Zionsville as an office manager for a few years. But I knew that what I needed to do was try and serve, especially on the conservative side. And when the House flipped, I told my boss, I don't know anybody in DC, but I'm going to go try and serve. So I knocked on doors with my resume and got an internship to a committee I didn't know existed before I went out there, but it was the Committee on House Administration. And my goal was to work hard, trust God, and just do the things that other folks weren't gonna do to make sure we could be successful. I ended up training members of Congress in that particular job. And then I was able to move over to a leadership office where you looked at what's the strategic perspective of our legislation? How do we look at what every member needs from their district, from them, and then get that across the finish line? So I didn't really talk about differentiating, but I know I'm getting the hook, so we can talk about that at another point here. But I'll give it up.
My name's Mark Hurt. I grew up in Somerville. Folks live in Fairmount. Went to Madison Grant, graduate of Taylor University. Went to Baylor University for foreign policy. Taylor was teaching and coaching, and then law school at Michigan State. So I have a real passion why I'm running. A lot of things I'd like to make improvements on in this country. I love the country, you know, I love God, I love my family, but we're running into some problems. So issue one, the debt, 34 trillion. When I wrote the article, it's over there. And I encourage you to pick up the article and take them home. The website's markhurt.org. But we're mortgaging the future away through unnecessary spending and unsustainable spending. So we gotta get a grip on that. I feel like Congress has delegated its authority. So often it's the executive branch running things. I'm thankful that the Supreme Court's reined in some of the agency overreach, where we have a cost-benefit analysis, knocking out some of the incredible regulations in coal and oil. You know, the gas is sky high. So I want to be someone that brings systemic reform. I talk about zero-based budgeting. Why don't we have our agencies justify every penny they spend every year? We go back to square one with transparency and hearings. And then we have a firm deadline. And we don't just have a Christmas tree and an omnibus bill at the end of the session that the lobbyists write, and members don't even read. That puts us deeper and deeper into debt. I think things that kind of shaped me wanting to run, Congresswoman Sparks saying she wasn't going to run, and that lasted a year. Two of my close friends, Mike Gerson, when I worked for Senator Coates, Mike Gerson was on my left. He's the guy that wrote the 9/11 speech for Bush. My brother-in-law was Mark Souter, the congressman from Fort Wayne. Both these guys died of cancer in the past year. And, you know, my days are numbered. I'm 61, and I felt like if I'm going to move the needle, and I'm going to allow God to use me as a light in what I see as a mission field for a short term, then now's the time. So I embarked, you know, on this endeavor. So that's a little bit about why I'm running. Legislatively, I helped the guy that was gopher on Love Boat. So when I talk to people, I was Gopher's gopher. Older people, they remember that. Fred was quite a neat guy, and I had a lot of rich experience. One of which, you know, conference committees, worked with Jenny Thomas sustaining President Bush's veto on family medical leave. Then Senator Coates ran against Joe Hogshead. Mark Souter asked me to come over and help create a health plan. So I worked with a team of guys. One was Greg Hampton in my Bible study who worked for Kasich, and we created the health savings account. Married a lady, she was moved to Michigan, 3 Bible studies praying she could stay in Indy. That didn't happen. So I helped Governor Engler as his health advisor and traveled the state to defeat Clinton's healthcare bill. We've been back in Indiana 25 years. I practiced law in Noblesville and Kokomo, and I think in answering questions, I'll go in a little bit more of that. Yeah. I'm a strict constitutionalist. Judges don't make law, they interpret the law. So the legislature has the power. And Article 1, Section 8 shows they have the power to spend and raise taxes. And as you say, we've moved to the president introducing the budget. We've moved to the executive branch authorizing under the War Powers Act military operations for extended periods of time without consent or advice of the United States Congress. So they need to reclaim their authority that they have in the United States Constitution. I think the way things have become more international connected, I think that's part of why the executive branch has grown in its power. I was having an event in Westfield, and the lady who helps me. She's in Jordan with her son. I talked to a guy that was on a Beck Hybrids trip in the Grand Cayman. And then I said, oh, I'll see you next week. Well, we're moving over to Bermuda. And then there were like 4 people in Florida. You know, when I grew up working on the farm in Summitville, there wasn't this international aspect. There wasn't this travel, people having dual houses. So I agree with you. We must get back to the United States Congress reclaiming its authority. The Chevron deference issue, the Supreme Court's dealing with it now, but that gives agencies a lot of power to take laws passed by Congress and kind of legislate. And that wasn't the Founding Fathers' intent. So I'm hopeful that this court we have comes in on Chevron deference and takes away some of the agency power in that realm where unelected bureaucrats are making multi-million-dollar decisions and many times influenced by groups, environmental, energy. I went to church with a guy whose life was threatened. He worked for Reagan. And I was amazed when I heard how the mafia was involved and some of the things that were happening, you know, kind of through an agency. So I agree with you. I think that answers your question.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I agree with you that the Congress has ceded a lot of power to the administrative branch, the executive branch, and the executive branch will soak up anything that you give them and more. And they will say, and that includes executive actions, where if the Congress is not going to take an action and actually pass laws, they'll say, I'm going to step in. The president will say, I'm going to step in and just do the thing. And that takes power away from Congress. And I think you're right that a lot of folks haven't actually read it, because the Congress is in control, but they oftentimes want to take the easy route and say, I'm just going to hand this off, pass legislation that maybe is not that specific either, and then tell the agencies, figure it out, instead of coming back to Congress. And that's very problematic. One of the things that I think we have to do, that the House has to do, is to pull some of that back, is to reauthorize agencies. So there's 1,500 agencies out there right now that are not, it's actually over that, but that are not authorized currently. And what that means is that they're being funded by Congress without being told, here are your marching orders of what to do with that money. And so that takes a lot of hard work. But you can set up a subcommittee inside of each of the committees and say, your responsibility in this subcommittee is to find all of the agencies in your purview and make sure that they are pulled in and that they sit in front of Congress to be told, how are you going to spend this money before that money is appropriated. Right now they know, you're just going to give the money, why would I ever listen to Congress? And so I think Congress needs to do the hard work of pulling that authority back. Second part is definitely on Chevron deference. So the Supreme Court is looking at the fisheries case now that I hope is going to come back and say there's strike a lot of Chevron deference so that agencies don't have the authority to just say, I'm going to fill in the blanks how I feel like it, instead of Congress telling them how to fill in the blanks specifically. And then I think there's another piece of it too, and it goes back to Congress sometimes not wanting to do the hard work. So maybe with the budget, you look at a 2-year budget instead of a 1-year budget. And you make them do that hard work in the first year of their term, because everybody knows when you get into the election year of the term, they don't want to do something that they could be considered challenging. So make sure that Congress retains that power.
Thank you.
Well, from my perspective, the key issue that the Congress is falling down on is just essentially managing our spending. That is one of the key functions of our Congress right now, the power of the purse. Back in 2000, we had spending caps that were in place that were abandoned actually during the Bush administration. Consequently, we went from generating 4 years of consecutive surpluses to the first year of the Bush administration, turning that around by roughly $500 billion with the first tax cut. So Congress has essentially lost their way with respect to managing the budget. The second thing that I realized in running a national practice is just how much the different government agencies have in setting forth regulations. So for example, in the tax area, I mean, the tax code is a beast in and of itself. It's roughly 8,000 pages. But what Congress has done is delegated to the Treasury Department the authority to interpret these different laws. So consequently, you have 24,000 pages of regulations that interpret these different laws and make them so much more complicated. Furthermore, Congress has delegated to the Internal Revenue Service, part of the Treasury Department, to then interpret those rules even more, and you've got about 1 million pages of interpretation. That particular issue is across all of these different government agencies where Congress has essentially delegated all of their authority in these different regulatory areas. Max mentioned another issue of significance, basically being executive orders where, you know, President Trump did some great things with respect to the border and some other areas, but what happened on day one of the Biden administration, poof, you know, they were overturned. So again, Congress needs to take control of some of the, you know, basically their responsibilities to legislate on issues that are of importance to the country. So, thank you.
It always stinks going last, because you guys are, I mean, I agree with that, a lot of stuff that they say, and it's already been said, but there's too much overreach to Congress. Look, we're the greatest republic in the world, and our Constitution has been trampled on, and like you guys said, there's a lot of overreach, there's a lot of things being done that we have to go up and we have to hold people accountable, and we have to get in there and we have to protect our Constitution at all costs. I can't add much more to what they said. These guys are brilliant, but I just know that I'm here to work for you, and I'm gonna protect our Constitution and protect this country as best as I can. So thank you. Yeah, so, I mean, I think at the last forum we had, I think you saw me stand up and confront what I call a tyrant. I hate talking about people, but if I do that on the local level, you can believe that I'm gonna do that on the national level. I'm not willing to work at all with a Democrat that does not have my values and does not have your values. It's like, I hate to say it, Chuck Goodrich signed the House Bill 1338, and I mentioned this the other night. There's a lot of things in that bill. He said, when I confronted him about it on stage, he said, well, they sent a big stack of, like an omnibus type thing, and we had to vote for it. I'm sick of that. I'm sick of it. If you can't pull it out and then say, look, if you don't do this, I'm not voting for this. It's time to stop voting just to vote to get things passed so you can go home and play golf early. If we have to stay there all night and fight, we're gonna stay there all night and fight so we fix it and get it what we want. I mean, we have the majority, right? So we need to band together and do what's right for the country, and that is calling out people. Chuck Schumer, all these folks, they're bad for the country. You have to have somebody stand up and be your voice and fight for the common people in the country. But I'm telling you right now, if I go to Washington DC, I'm gonna fight and I'm gonna call people out, and I proved that the other night on stage in Anderson, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Again, I'm really the only candidate in the race that is running on the basis of term limits. And the reason I got to that point was we have such a dysfunctional system currently, both on the Republican and Democrat side. You know, for all intents and purposes, if you look at who's getting the attention on MSNBC, CNN, Fox, you've got the 10% on the extremes that are getting the 80% of the attention. Where I'm trying to focus my campaign is the 80% of the country that gets 20% of the attention. So most of the positions that I have developed come to that particular conclusion. So term limits to me are so important because I am willing to go ahead and take a chance on new minds, younger minds, different minds that might have an interest in solving real problems for our people. Right now, I have zero confidence that any of these individuals currently can get that accomplished. So from my standpoint, I kind of want to blow this thing up by getting brand new folks involved in the political process. I have no confidence whatsoever that you can go in as a bully to try to get something fixed. I just think we need an entirely new slate of individuals. So that's my philosophy on that.
When I was working in the House, Nancy Pelosi called Republicans murderers on the floor, and she had to have her words struck down and kicked out of the chamber for the rest of the day because of that action. And I think if you think that the Democrats are just, this far away from Republicans, you're looking at it wrong. I think that you're right that the country is saying we need to send people out that are going to fight. They're going to fight fire with fire. And I agree with that. And part of the strategic part behind sending someone like me is that I've been there, I've seen it, I know the bad actors, we know where they are, and we have not been crushed by it. And a big piece of Washington is that it tries to crush you. And it's both sides in a lot of cases. But if you're sending someone that you know is not gonna be stomped down by that, even the Tea Party folks that went out there in the 2011 wave, a lot of them came home and said, I don't wanna do this anymore. And so you need someone that knows how to get the work done inside of that. But the other piece of it, on the other side, is getting back to regular order like you mentioned. And so if you have single subject bills, if you're using your committees wisely to actually process all of the legislation, you have more eyes on it, you have smart people in Congress doing the hard work. When it gets to the floor, now you know I can go ahead and support this or not and speak loudly to that as well. What I've seen too much of is kind of a minority mindset in the House currently where you're just comfortable with talking about things and saying this is bad, but you have to do that. You also have to rally with your Republican members and say, okay, but here's how we're gonna fix it. Here's how we're gonna actually take what we care about and believe in and get that across the finish line. Because they are in the majority right now and they need to act like it and push back on the Democrats and take the conservative legislation and actually get that across the finish line.
But like Patrick, I'm a real supporter of term limits. I don't think there's any way you tame the beast and rein in the spending without term limits. It's not as easy a Republican and Democrat because a lot of issues transcend party lines. And when I worked out there, I'll tell you, conservative Democrats like Ralph Hall, Charlie Stenholm, they were a lot more conservative with me than the liberal Republicans from New England. So it's not necessarily a party sometimes, and the regions are so different. At the debate, I talked about civility. So I think you have a backbone, you really stand up for what you believe and you fight. But at the same time, I'm going to treat them with respect. And there are some places in this country, the woke agenda, East Coast. It's not just the woke agenda, it's the liberal extreme agenda. The progressives are talking about things and doing things that baffle us. It makes no common sense. So you're going to have to deal with those people in Congress. And I don't think compromise is the way you get things done, in the sense of compromising your values or not pushing them your way. You don't always get everything you want, but you got to stay firm. And we need more conservatives in the United States Congress. I think that social media is playing on some of the uncivility, and somehow you got to have a civil debate if you're going to solve some of the problems. And I think that's important. On your point, I think there's a lot of wisdom in how you fight, when you fight, and we see that right now. I see a lot of people, it's all about them, and they're a show horse. Chuck Goodrich stole my line from the first commercial I did.
Yes, 100%.
Probably not, and it's simply because I've met with the Freedom Fund individually before, and some of the people with the fund are pretty weird dudes.
I would say that the accountability is absolutely key there.
Yes.
But I think no at this point only because your allegiance is to the district that sent you, and I don't like feeling that the block of other members are gonna tell you how to vote, even if it is very, very close.
I don't know them, so I can't tell you. I talked to them. I believe in the accountability. My passion isn't to be a committee chair or rise in the party. My goal is to solve problems, and so that's the focus for me, if that helps.
Well, I thought it was just a yes or no question, so that's why I answered yes or no. So I didn't get a chance to explain it, but no, it's okay.
I
I'm
think
sorry.
it's 1 yes, 3 no's.
Well, I'm used to being abused, so it's okay. I'm just messing with you guys.
Oh, we're taking
I'm
care
just
of
messing
it.
with you.
This is civil.
It's all right.
So I think you're absolutely right. I did sign the term limits pledge, and I think it is important to say a lot of these people in Washington need to be told to go home. I think that's just a fact. And where I think you need to be careful is, what is the right number, right? Because you are correct in that if you cycle out every 1 term or 2 terms or something like that, it is the bureaucrats or the lobbyists or the staff in some cases that would run the show. So in my mind, I think it's 6 terms in the House and it's 2 terms in the Senate. where you build enough seniority to understand how the House operates, to get some things done, but you're also the elected official, the one that is sent there by the district to say, here's what we're gonna solve. But then you don't make it a career, because it's not supposed to be a career. You go home after that. Now, there's definitely some argument on what is the right number of terms, and I understand that, and I'd love to have that conversation. But term limits are very important, but you're right that you have to be careful that it's not then bureaucrats running the show. I think one of the ways that, to talk about differentiation, pull back from the first opener, is that the rules package, that starts working, and they start putting the rules package together in November. So you get elected, and they're already just starting that process, and so it's before you're sworn in. So one thing that differentiates me is to send somebody out to Washington that knows the intricacies of that, and can say, no, we're gonna put the rules package in place that protects the people and protects not the people on the floor, the people in the districts. And I think that's a big differentiator from my perspective, to say, let's get to work right away, one, sure, but also let's change the rules of the House to make sure we're actually gonna accomplish what we talk about. Okay.
Well, as I mentioned in my introduction, my key issue, the linchpin for getting anything done, involves congressional term limits. You talk about the administrative state. With the administrative state, they are subject to the power of the purse from the Congress. So to the extent that you are electing people that have the correct mindset with respect to spending, they can have an effect on the administrative state in the world according to me. So on my website, patrickgiffordcongress.com, have to promote that, right? I went through and put together probably 12 minutes of videos to describe how do you go about term limits. I had to figure this stuff out myself. I didn't get the nomenclature right. So that was one. The second thing is, why do we have to have term limits? What are some of the existing problems with Congress? In my view, part of the problem right now is we have about 180 to 200 lawyers as congressmen. If they reflected the actual population of the country, we would have 5. Now, attorneys are, I hate to pick on Mark here. They're great when you have a legal issue, but they're exceptional at fighting. They're exceptional at arguing. I had to deal with that all the time working in my line of business. And they're not very good at getting creative solutions to problems. So that's part of the why as well. In my particular role, I'm looking at 8 years maximum. So 4 terms in the House, term in the House, term in the Senate. It's kind of like grade school. You get to a point at 8th grade, it's time to move on. So that is my view with respect to Congress. I think your organization said 24 years. That's crazy. You can't, in terms of a time frame. So
Not our organization, the delegates that came.
the delegates, 24 years. It's, are you kidding me?
That's crazy.
Yeah. So that's my sense. Again, we have to do something constructive to change the people. The only way to effectively give us the stick to get people out is term limits. We have the carrot to get people in by electing them. We don't have a mechanism to say it's enough, time to go, as we do with the president. So that is why I'm so passionate about this. If you don't fix this issue, we're gonna have significant issues. And I have a plan of how I would get this done. Like I said, I probably have 11, 12 minutes of videos on my website that talk about this. By the way, here's my platforms in detail. Please feel free to grab a copy.
Thank you.
Yep.
Well, we do know that incumbents are elected 90% of the time,
Absolutely.
92% of the time.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and we have people make life-changing decisions
Yeah.
based on Victoria exiting. Max moved his family back, Raju ended up quitting his job, so
It had consequences on all of us.
it had consequences on a lot of people. It didn't affect me personally, but, I have empathy for people like Max and Raju that made life-changing decisions as a result of this.
I am for term limits all the way across the board. I mean, starting from the bottom up to the top up, and I think I said that last week in our forum. Look, we're Americans, and we've lost our way, and we've got people like the Squad and Chuck Schumer. Wouldn't have been. I think you might have said this, and I'm sorry, I don't want to steal your time. But how great would that have been if they had term limits?
That was me.
Did you say that? And you can ask my wife, I've been saying that forever,
Okay.
and, we agree on that, thank you.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just too much is too much, right? And it's time to rein these people in, it's time to try to change things, it's time to send somebody up there that's gonna fight for you and try to make these changes. I haven't been to Washington DC. I wanna go, I wanna fight for you, I wanna go and work as hard as I can for you, and if that's only 2 terms, that's great. I think that a person can only accomplish so much over so much time, and then you get burnt out, like Victoria's told me. She told me to the side, and I hate to throw our conversation under the bus, but she said that I'm tired, Larry, I'm tired, but I have one more thing I gotta get done in Washington DC. Well, if you're so tired, it's time to pass the torch. And I get it, we all get tired. We all get to a point to where we wanna step away from some things, but at this point in time, we have gotta fight for the soul of our nation, and term limits is very important. And I think that, I know the job I'm at now, I wish I had term limits, but, I agree with you, we need term limits, 100%.
At every level. I think the disincentives to stay and keep running so you get vested, and you
Yeah.
get health benefits, and you got a retirement. I don't think the founding fathers envisioned this being a job for pay,
No, I
where it's a
agree.
career, right? So that's where term limits come in. That might be an incentive for some to stay in a little longer than they want, right, to get vested. I saw in Michigan with Governor Engler, they had term limits, and it does strengthen the arm of lobbyists and those people in trade organizations that have decades of experience. So the governor has, in all the states, right, 2 terms, just like a sheriff, just like some other offices. And I think that's good, because that's the George Washington model. He realized he didn't want to be a king. People wanted him to keep serving more than 2 terms. And just looking at DC, there's no way to change dysfunctional spending unless the incentives are redirected for the people, not for my career or what I think's best. And you see it even in your own jobs. You get numb and you get a little callous when you do something. You're in DC year after year, and you're not back as much with the people. So I think you gotta have new blood, you gotta have new ideas, and there's negative consequences that flow if you don't have that. So that's where I think term limits come in. Now, we talked about Article 1 and Article 2. You know, I noticed when I was reading that, pay raises for Congress and the president can't happen during the people's term that vote.
Right.
It has to be prospective. And I think that's true with term limits. You'll have to sunset, and it'll have to apply prospectively, because people that are there don't want to term limit themselves out of power. So I think that's one little piece of the puzzle. 38 states to pass. It's just tough getting the cultures on the coast to think like we do. So it may take legislation.
I'm not an attorney, but I'll go with my best understanding what it is. It gives essentially the states the power to call for a convention of the states.
Okay.
And that's how my vision of how we go ahead and bring about term limits. Congress technically can't even term limit themselves, because if somebody ended up, if they miraculously passed legislation, it could be declared unconstitutional because the Constitution lays out.
Yeah.
So you actually have to take the process that your organization is taking. And I discovered that's how you had to do it when I was studying this stuff on my own.
Okay.
So,
Well,
but basically that's what it does. It provides an opportunity for the states to call a convention. And I love the way that your organization has it phrased, where you're really dealing with 3 issues.
Yeah.
Term limits, the budget, and, well, you talk about other things like land and so forth.
the federal overreach.
Yeah, so.
Okay. Well, that's one way to amend the Constitution. You all knew Article 5 was amendments, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Smarter than a Biden judicial nominee.
Right.
But there's another way to amend the Constitution, because the convention has never been.
It's never been done, yeah.
Right.
The standard way would
Yeah.
require basically a majority of Congress to.
2/3 of each house.
I've seen Syrian IDs, that scares me. I've seen a guy with a Syrian ID come try to rent property off of me. I told him no, because we can't do background checks. We don't know if he's a killer or a murderer or what. I mean, like, right? I mean, I don't want somebody in my apartments that are gonna do this. And I've seen, Mexican IDs. Who was the other one? It was Venezuelan. Yeah, I had a Venezuelan couple come up with that. I mean, I've seen a lot of this. And I've been dealing with the homeless coalition in Anderson. When we were passing out tents and sleeping bags and food, there were several illegal immigrants that were, I call them illegal aliens, you can call them immigrants, whatever. But they're there. They're in our city. I had maybe a year or so ago, I had a guy rear end me, and there were 5 Mexican guys in the car. None of them could speak English, and they all had Mexican IDs. And the police officer, when he rear-ended the car, the police officer says, "Not much I can do about it because they're here." And so I see a lot of that, and it's unfortunate, but we got to deal with it. We got to shut the border down. I mean, they're here. If you think they're not here, you're crazy.
The scariest part of this is that we don't actually know.
Yeah.
And, I think the numbers that they're reporting now are some 8 million illegal immigrants that have come across the border that are the known, that have been apprehended.
Yeah.
And then there's the 1.5 million that are, known gotaways.
Yeah.
And then there's the completely unknown number of unknown gotaways. And I think where they're at in the country, we're not sure. The only ones that we maybe know that have shown up is when we have some conservative governors saying we're gonna send them to sanctuary cities, and I appreciate that, because I think truly if that didn't happen, if we didn't have them shipping them to Chicago, New York, and San Francisco, this issue wouldn't be in the press like it is now. Because, Mayor Adams and Johnson and a few others have said, they've cried mercy and said we can't do it anymore, and if it's a Democratic mayor saying that, it forces it to stay in the press, and it can't just be Republicans talking about it. But the scary part is, I don't know the answer to that question.
We known people that were encountered 1.7 gotaways. How come they're gotaways? Well, we don't know who or where they are. Poof, they just got away. So, but there's really 4 issues with the border. It costs, all of us that pay taxes $1,000 a person a year. That's one. 2 is, just the public safety issue where, these people that are being murdered, you see the police being attacked in New York and so forth. So, that's a key issue as well. The fentanyl issue, actually, Hamilton County does a very good job of keeping records on addiction-related issues. So 2023, there were 350 opioid-related overdoses taking place in Hamilton County, 25 opioid-related deaths. So big, real number, and you extrapolate that through all our different counties, and again, it adds up to a pretty significant number. But the last thing I talk about is, and I know this sounds kind of odd, it's such a racist and class discriminatory process by doing that. So why is it that? Well, again, we have, let's say, a lot of people that don't go to college or whatever, they take entry-level jobs where they're maybe not making a huge amount of money per hour. But we have all these illegals in that are coming in and in some cases competing. They will hold those wages down forever, for a significant period of time. So it's class discriminatory. It hurts, poor white people. It hurts, US-based Latinos and blacks. But it also, in a lot of these major cities, and you'll see a lot of the African-American groups like in Chicago, they're pissed because essentially their public resources are being reallocated.
But people, my friend that's retiring on Friday, heading up counterintelligence for a National Guard, he said that there are a lot of people coming in without a security clearance or a background check. And I guarantee you when they come from People's Republic of China, the communists know they're here. And they know they want them here and why.
Yeah.
And we don't even know who they are. Uzbekis, Azerbaijan's, these are the former Muslim Russian republics. They're coming across the border and we don't even know where they are. So that presents a big problem. So you can't talk about anything until you secure the border. Now here in central Indiana, we have farms with tomatoes. They want migrants. Our construction trades, they tell me the best workers are Amish and the Mexican workers, right? They work hard. So I'm not here to say they're not hard workers. We've got to upgrade and modernize that work visa system. But you can't do that until you get security and you seal the border. Over 75,000 fentanyl deaths in 1 year nationwide. You look at the healthcare spending, Texas, Arizona, and California, over $1 billion on uncompensated care. People coming in, having the baby, getting prenatal care. So, you know, as a Christian, I was reading in my devotion yesterday, I'm to love other people. But we've got to have a secure border. And then we start, today in the news, you know, in Ecuador, the president sent his troops into the Mexican embassy to get somebody. They were taking over the jails in Ecuador. You gotta have law and order. The role of government is to help promote security and national defense, right? So, this is all a part of it. Yeah.
So, you know, I was appointed by City Council as, on the Redevelopment Commission. We're bringing jobs back to Anderson. Anderson's been forgotten for years. We're bringing a Siakam paper plant. We're flying down to Oklahoma to see industrial plants. We're working hard. I kind of got my foot in the door of a lot of these places. The fire hose plant from the Italian fire hose plant that we just brought here on Rabel Avenue. These are high-paying jobs that Madison County needs. The 5th District needs these jobs. You look at Kokomo, they're booming right now. But we can always bring high-paying jobs, and we have to have people to go out and champion and fight for just the regular people to get good-paying jobs. I'm proud of what we're doing on the Redevelopment Commission. It's a lot of hard work. There's a lot of checks and balances, and I'm trying to be that balance and that check. So for the 5th District, I want to work for the poor and the middle class and everybody. But we're struggling in this district just for people to eat. The cost of living is so high. $4 bread, gas, and milk, it's just not the way it's supposed to be. And I gotta go I have to represent you, the people, just like me. I'm sick of it, but I wanna bring jobs back to the 5th District, high-paying jobs, and put Indiana back on the map as a good place, or 5th District on the map as a good place to raise your kids. And to raise your family, we're working hard, and that's as hard as I'm working on this redevelopment commission. I'm going to work as hard there in Congress as I do here.
Yeah. So constituent services is key. If you're a veteran, if you need a passport to go somewhere, people are telling me they don't get the constituent services. That's the main role of a United States congressman. You represent the people. You're in the people's house. When I started this, I traveled around AgriCorps, Marion, they make the cornbread for Chelsea, Michigan, Jiffy. You know, I go over to Atlas, they're making the seats in Pittsburgh Steelers football stadium. You talked about the new paper plant here. A big part of this is jobs, and you gotta cultivate a work ethic. People shouldn't be getting benefits if they don't wanna work. And they shouldn't be getting as much. And what are other things I want to do for the 5th District? I got a real passion for mental health care. When I prosecuted for 25 years, the police were pulling their hair out because they get called to a house. I'll use the example of bipolar. They take them for an emergency detention order, and then 72 hours later they're back home and they get called again. And it's over and over again. We need more hospital beds, probably 3 like we built in Fishers, where they got about 100 beds. We gotta have more psychiatrists, graduated 1, they went out of state. You gotta have higher pay for those people, loan repayment. You gotta have more counselors. And the rural areas, the officers aren't skilled and trained to de-escalate. People get hurt, people end up going to jail, and it's all mental health. No copay or deductible when you get your mental health care in jail. So there's a better way to do that. That's a passion that I see in the 5th District. I have councilmen telling me that people get dropped off here in Anderson, homeless, mental health issues, then they're supposed to get their services here. They're coming from another county. That's not right. So we gotta have an integrated system. And what are other things I wanna do? My dad, who worked at Delco, he's at the hospital right now over at St. John's. He got a kidney infection. I don't know if he goes home tonight, but he's 30 years at Delco, and he said, it's always about jobs. You gotta fight for jobs. And for me, part of why I'm running, I'm a working man Republican. So while I'm an attorney, that means maybe 60 hours a week. And I'm working while I'm running, you know. I think part of our problem here is there's so much time spent on fundraising. And the way our campaign finance is set up, if you can self-fund and you got millions, I just don't know if that's what the founding fathers wanted. You had to own property, only certain people could vote. It took a while for women to be able to vote, that was a good reform. We ended slavery, that was good. But I think we may need to do some campaign finance reform issues here, because things are going to the extremes. And that affects the 5th district. And it would affect jobs and everything like that. I'm thankful for Nestle. I'm thankful for some of the positives. You don't want to focus on the negatives. But even downtown Anderson, we got to help the people lower income. So I think that means more mechanic training, more skilled trades, voc ed. You have some good shop teachers. I just toured D1 Mold over there at Alexandria. The shop teacher's so good, the kids want to get that trade, and then they want to work there the rest of their life. And that's what it's all about, you know. You don't have to go to college if you don't want to, but you get a welding skill. Or in this case, they're putting together parts and working in a factory. And I think that's great. So we need more of that, the skilled training.
So the number one thing that I hear when I go around the district is cost of living. It is through the roof. It is 20% higher now than 3 years ago when you're talking about essential goods. That's food, that's fuel, that's healthcare costs. And one of the things that I'm working on would bring to this is directly to benefit the 5th district. One, you have to stop spending so much money in Washington. I think that's just a known fact. And in this room, we understand that, but not enough people do. Second one is to reduce regulations on small and medium-sized businesses. I very much appreciated Trump's executive order, even though I'd rather the Congress worked on this, but the executive order that said if you're going to put forward a new regulation, you need to repeal 2 others. And so that will help with this particular district as well. And then the other part is retapping American energy. So 3 years ago, we were a net exporter. Now, anything that's done on the energy side is in spite of the current administration, not alongside of. And then some innovative things that I've thought about is, because I agree on the constituent services, you have to consider this office essentially to be the mayor of the 5th district. I've seen too many members of Congress that think of it and say, oh, that's not a federal issue, I'm not gonna handle that. Or go talk to somebody else, because that's not mine, or go talk to the senator, that kind of thing. That's wholly inappropriate. If someone's calling a congressional office, there's a good chance that's one of their worst days. Why would you, like, I'm reaching out to the last person on the list, say, help me with this issue. You need to take that and say, okay, I'm gonna help you solve this problem. I'm gonna make the connection for you, whatever it is. This is my challenge now because I'm essentially the mayor of this district. Another thing that I think would be a wonderful idea, and I would do on day one, is open a congressional office inside of the Marion VA hospital. And so a lot of times veterans get poor care, and I helped start the very first congressional office inside of a VA hospital. It was in Florida with Congressman Mast at the time. The VA hospital does not want that because they know that there's accountability there and there's oversight if you have that office inside of it. So things like that where you can say, how am I gonna directly help the 5th? Because you're right. How would you directly help the 5th? And that's one of the ways, especially with veterans, that you'd get good care or allow for good care right away.
Yes, Max and I think a lot on several issues. You know, candidly, the things that, you know, my 2 candidates mentioned here as well, those are all really state and local issues, every single one of them. So from the standpoint of the federal government making a difference on that, ain't gonna happen. So I agree with Max that the job of a congressman with respect to their district is constituent services. If they have particular issues, you need to be their bridge to Washington, D.C. to get those matters fixed. Again, how can a congressman help the 5th district? Most of all, by dealing with spending. Essentially, all these different matters that you see are all cause, effect, and, you know, supply, demand. The inflation that we're seeing is not the cause. The inflation is the effect. The cause of it is because we've blown $35 trillion on money.
Yeah.
So inflation is caused by the fact we've destroyed the value of our US dollar. So cause effect is a big item. The other one is supply demand. We've created this huge supply of money. Well, it's worth less. So again, very simple principles, cause effect, supply demand. So again, to affect the type of people that Larry's talked about, again, I agree with you, Max. I have a grassroots campaign. I talk to people like you by the hundreds every week. Issue number one, the economy, because people are, the average Hoosier is struggling to buy stuff, buy groceries, make decisions. Oh, well, I'm not gonna buy something that is a premium brand. I'm gonna go ahead and get the off-brand issue because that's what I can afford. So that's the issue. The border ends up being number two. From talking to regular folks like yourself, and from my standpoint, it has cleansed my soul. When you sit there and talk to regular people and hear what their issues are, you develop a lot of empathy. You develop a lot of perspective in talking to these folks. So one other news flash here, when I go ahead and get into Congress, I do not intend to take any committee assignments at all. Boy, that sounds kind of a harsh thing to do. What were you gonna do with your time? One involves going ahead in constituent services. Number two, working with organizations like yourself to bring about term limits. Because I think it's doable. We've created all these amazing things in the world, technology-wise, electric cars, SpaceX sending rockets everywhere in the world, right, everywhere in the solar system. But we can't term limit the Congress. We need to change our belief systems in terms of what is possible. And this is something I think we could accomplish. And I think it will be good for society to get that done. That's how you deal with inflation. That's how you help constituents in the 5th District, by dealing with issues like that. Thank you.
So differentiating, I think you can understand me. I grew up here. I've lived here my whole life, with the exception when I was at school or in DC. So last 25 years, I came back. I didn't live in DC. And I understand what people are going through. I don't think we talk enough about families. The whole backbone of Indiana is that family structure. We transmit our values. We teach character as a mother and father, if we're fortunate enough to have a mom and dad. And we teach compassion and how to help those that are poor or less fortunate. And we reach out and we're there as a community. When I was out in DC, I remember Senator Coates had the select committee on youth, children, and family. I like to bring that back. Who talks about pornography? I mean, it's getting in the minds, it's becoming an addiction for some of our youth. Their ideas are being shaped by TikTok and Chinese foreign policy when parents aren't there, really monitoring like they should. Utah's passed a law that kids don't get the social media before age 16. We've got to do some things here in our country because a lot of things, it's a heart and mind issue. And that's what changes, our culture. So that's part of who I am, what I'm going to be fighting for. Sometimes it's not laws, it's the hearts and minds of people. These younger folk, we need them to appreciate capitalism, working hard, running your own business, helping others. A lot of the business people, they're the ones, they do things behind the scenes that are amazing, helping people. We need to be less dependent on government. We need to let churches step up, people volunteer, and really step together, as a community to live out the Christian faith. You ask about differentiator. I just think the current system's broke. It's not working. Nothing gets done. And I think that's the way lobbyists want it. They benefit. They're running things. And I think you gotta have some sharp cookies that work hard for a limited period of time to go in and really get some things changed. Reagan used to talk about a rendezvous with destiny and not letting the administrative state and all those bureaucrats in DC tell us how to live our lives. And we as people, we the people, that's where the power is. We've allowed government to get too much control on our life. So I want to fight against that, be a leader against that, and appreciate your time.
So it's not very often that you can send somebody to Washington that is conservative and understands how to get to work right away in all of the messiness that is Washington. And I've seen it up close and personal. I know how to hit the ground running. I think that's the thing that differentiates me from really anybody here or outside of this particular room. And when I look at some of the massive challenges in front of us, when things we've talked about, cost of living, the border, national debt, all of these big issues, we don't have time to waste. And historically speaking, we get a year and a half after this election to make meaningful change before something in the matrix changes and we're not in power anymore. And so I don't want to waste that time. On one side you have, it takes you about 3 years to figure out how are you going to operate in Washington. And I know that because I train members of Congress for a living. And so then you have on the other side someone like the current Congresswoman who has said she doesn't want or is not willing to build the coalitions to actually accomplish what we're talking about. I want to be someone who takes the conservative values that are instilled in me and that you hear around the district and go out there and actually act on those and start accomplishing those things on the conservative side. And a piece of that too is just thinking innovatively. So maybe it's a 2-year budget so that you force members of Congress to do the hard things. Maybe that's something like, one idea I had was tax breaks for a second job for someone who's already working 40 hours. We're fighting so hard to say, how do we add work requirements to some other welfare things? Why don't we say the people that are working hard and putting food on the table, let's find a way to give them a tax break to continue that in their own lives. Maybe it's something like voter IDs at the national level, or if you move state to state, they don't ping each other and say, hey, you're on a new voter roll, you're not coming off of the other one. Why should that be a printed out wet signature document that you have to fax back to the previous state? Let's solve that. That's not changing elections at the national level, that's accountability. I think thinking through some of these things in just a different way, bringing a fresh energy to it, but also being able to get to work on behalf of the 5th District immediately is what I bring to the table here. So if you go to maxforindiana.com, all my information is there. I also have signs if anybody wants them, but I'd appreciate your support and further conversation as we go.
Well, first of all, wasn't this a great evening? We actually talked about things.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to just talk about an issue that's important to me first that is really not within the scope of running for Congress, and then I'll get into what differentiates me in my closing. When I also started to run for Congress, I thought the greatest social problem that we have here right now involves children being born without a dad in the household, and that's 40% of all births here taking place in the U.S. Those children are at risk to drop out of high school, get pregnant, become drug users, commit suicide. Again, dealing with that issue is probably one of the greatest societal problems we have to deal with. I've got ideas of how to address it, but again, that's beyond what I'm focusing on right now. What differentiates me, I think my key issue, besides what I'm running on plank-wise, is that I have the ability to creatively solve problems. It was one of the greatest strengths of how I became a partner at the biggest accounting firm in the world and run one of the most sophisticated tax practices. Everybody said Patrick's probably the most creative CPA I've ever met. So that's my differentiator. As I meet with literally hundreds of Hoosiers each week, I'm saddened because so many of you are frustrated with Congress's ability to solve our problems. And I say, we don't have to put up with that anymore. That's right. We don't have to put up with a Congress that allows illegal immigrants to flood our border. We don't have to put up with an economy where the average Hoosier is blown away each week by going to the grocery store. And we absolutely don't need to tolerate Congress spending 10, 20, 30, 40 years in the big house without necessarily helping us with any of our real issues. So let me ask you a question. Would you guys be happy if this were the last time that AOC, Nancy Pelosi, and all the other ineffective members of Congress run? Mm-hmm. If so, say aye.
Aye.
That's why you need to put me into Congress, to bring about congressional term limits, something over 80% of Americans agree on, irrespective of what your political party is, because we are all smart enough to know that nothing changes where nothing changes. Exactly. So go to patrickinforcongress.com to learn more about me. I have campaign materials and a good discussion of what my planks are, but they get to the real heart of the issues. thanks for coming. This is a great event. I love these people here, and I love our conversation. Travel safe.
Yeah, so I think while you guys were in Washington D.C. fighting the fight in Washington D.C., there were people here at home fighting the fight. I was a firefighter, EMT. I was a baseball coach, football coach, mentoring kids all over the place, here from Alexandria to Anderson. I've seen the kids that didn't have fathers in the homes. I was one of those kids. You don't have to go to Washington D.C. to fight for your district. We all stand up, we can fight for our district. It really saddens me that the American dream is pretty much gone. The big house, the big yards, the moms out of the homes. Our kids don't have a chance. Look at Pendleton over here, letting them wear the furry stuff and litter boxes in school. Where have we gone? What have we done? I blame that on people in Washington, D.C. I've done CPR on people that are in cardiac arrest, that have been on fentanyl and dying in respiratory arrest. I just did it 2 months ago, and I wasn't even, I'm not a firefighter anymore. I'm not an EMT. I have a broken body from a lot of things, and I still got on my hands and knees to try to save a man's life. You need people that care about you. You need people who are going to fight for you. I'm tired of these, I'm calling them, man, they're idiots. They have forgot about us. You gotta send somebody up there that knows what is going on in the ground in this district. I know Max just moved back. I'm sorry that you uprooted your life to come back for a Congress lady that didn't know which way she was going in life. I know which way I'm going in life. No matter what happens here this election, I know where I'm going. And I hope you do too. I hope you find that peace. But I'm here to fight for you. I'm here to go there and do the right thing for you. I'm here to fight for the kids, the moms, the single dads. I just think everybody has a right in this life to be able to earn a decent wage, make a decent living, and just have the American dream, man. These people are flooding our borders for the American dream. It's almost not here anymore. Because we're letting things happen in our country that should never happen. We gotta get this president out of office. But that's what differentiates me from these guys. I don't have time in Washington D.C. And I think that's what we need to start sending to Washington D.C. is people like us. Because we know the pain and we know the fight that it takes just to survive every single day. And those people in Washington D.C. have forgot about us. And it's time to go up there and fight and remind them that there are people that are here in our district that struggle every single day. And that's the reason why I got into this. I didn't get into it just because Victoria Sparks was dropping out. I got into it because I'm sick and tired of people forgetting about us. And it's time to send people that are going to be us. And I hope I can represent you guys one day. But that's what differentiates me. I'm just a normal human being that struggles just like everybody else here. And I appreciate your time and thank you for letting me come tonight. Mark.
Thank you, guys. I'm personally very encouraged by the number of candidates that we've gotten in our 5th district. I think that's great regardless of the initial reasons for, this, but I think it's better than having 1 or 2 out there. It's great. And we really appreciate the time you guys are putting into this and the effort that you're making. And a couple of points. I'd like us all to leave this room tonight remembering that we need to start talking to our neighbors, our family members, our kids. They've got to get involved in this country. This is about we the people. And it's because we the people have been sitting on our butts for 150 years that we've gotten here. This didn't happen overnight. I know sometimes it seems like you wake up, it's a whole new nightmare, but it's happened over the last 150 years. And so it's not gonna get fixed, but we've got to get people starting it in the right direction and moving it. And this position in our district, we got 9 districts representatives in Indiana, okay? This is our way to touch Washington, D.C. This is the only way we can touch Washington, D.C. is through our congressional representatives. Okay, everybody thinks our senators too, but that's a whole nother story. But you can elect a president and you can talk to these people. Whoever gets this position, you're in District 5, you need to be calling them all the time and letting them know what you think. And thank them for the job if they're doing good, and rip them a new one if they're not. Because that's what they're accepting. And, you know, they got a lot on their back, but that's their role, they know it, and they need to hear from us, okay? So we need to be supportive of them in the good and the bad, all right? So I wanna thank you guys again for coming, really appreciate it. And, you know, let's talk later about how we can get this out to as many people as we can.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay.